Good evening and welcome to this month's Whiskey Me live tasting. Thanks very much for joining us. It's the month of March 2024 and this month we are tasting Benromach Organic and Ezra Brooks 99. Super excited to share these whiskies with you. You may have tried them already. You may have saved them for tonight. Either way, I hope you're going to enjoy them with us. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. We are soon going to be launching our spring whiskey. You might remember we started doing our seasonal series back at Christmas time with the winter malt. Well, the spring one is just around the corner. It's going to be called the Spring Blend, and it's a blend of world whiskies. So there's a whole mixture of stuff in there. I'm not going to tell you what's in there exactly, but what I can promise you is that it epitomizes springtime. So I think fragrance, florality, grassiness, brightness, freshness, and deliciousness. Cool. So without further ado, we're going to crack on with this month's tasting. We're going to start with Benromach, our Scotch single malt whiskey of the month, as we always do. And for that, we are joined by Gordon Muir from Gordon MacPhail. Hey, Gordon.
Hi. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. You work for Gordon MacPhail and your name's Gordon Muir, so you therefore get the email address gordonm@Gordon MacPhail.
I do.
So everyone must say to you, "Oh, how long have you owned the company for?" and all this kind of stuff.
Very sadly, I'm not that Gordon. I get the email address. They get the millions and millions of pounds worth of extraordinary whiskey in the warehouse, but I get to sell it and taste it and work on it, so it could be worse.
It's not so bad. It's just a cool email address, I think. Well, let's get into it. What do you think's best? Should we talk about Gordon MacPhail first, or should we talk about Benromach first?
Let's talk a wee bit Gordon MacPhail, because then the story of Benromach Distillery is really entwined with it, having been bought by Gordon MacPhail and what they did with it and why. So, yeah, we can kick off a bit with Gordon MacPhail. Best known, of course, as independent bottler. It started off as a shop in Elgin in Speysider. And shops are pretty central to the foundation of the Scotch whisky category, as you probably know, with John Walker having one in Kilmarnock and the Chivas brothers having one in Aberdeen, and lots of big global brands developed their blend to sell in their shop. But the Urquharts, who owned Gordon MacPhail for a very simple reason, which was there's a guy called John Urquhart who was taken on as an apprentice by Mr. Gordon and Mr. MacPhail, and then they both died. I'm not saying it was suspicious. I wasn't even there. It was hundreds of years ago. But that John Urquhart became became a partner and became the owner of the business. So that's why the Urquhart family own Gordon MacPhail. And John Urquhart and his son George, who came into the business, really were passionate about malt whiskey at a time when nobody was doing malt whiskey. Scotch whiskey was growing and growing and growing, but it's growing on the back of Johnny Walker and White Horse and Cutty Sark and J&B and all these amazing blends getting out around the world. The reason for that, I think, is because the company was based in Elgin, and if you know Elgin, it's right in the heart of Speyside. So basically, you throw a well-aimed bottle in any direction from our office, you're going to hit a distillery. And so the shop being there, of course, one of the things that they would trade in is the local malt, and as fairly burgeoning local businessmen, of course, they'd have great relationships with a lot of those owners. So our ability to source new make spirit from all of the famous houses of Speyside really comes from a lot of those family relationships. And this idea of, rather than blending the whiskey together, to really just say, well, we've left that liquid in a sherry cask for 15 years and it's absolutely delicious, and noticing the effect of time. And the Urquhart family, they're kind of hoarders. They wouldn't mind me saying that. They do like to keep a little bit of everything back. So learning the effect that time had on whiskey, taking an approach to whiskey which at the time was really unfamiliar, which is identifying the differences that the distilleries have, and selling malt whiskey as itself was really foundational in the forming of the malt whiskey category. So if we go forward to the 50s and 60s, George Urquhart owned the company, still mainly a shop, but now making some whiskey, wholesaling wines and spirits and tea and all sorts of stuff as well in the local area, but accumulating all these casks of incredible Speyside whiskey and then bottling them at an older age than anybody else did. And in the mid-60s, he launched the Connoisseur's Choice range, which we still do, Connoisseur's Choice from G&M, and that was really the very first time outside of the immediate local area you could get a malt whiskey from a named distillery at a named age, and never went on to become the biggest. And others, Glenfiddich, in due course, Macallan, Glenmorangie, the Balvenie, the big, huge brands that we know and really supercharged that category. A lot of them really owed a debt to George Urquhart and his pioneering work in uncovering malt whiskey. So over that time, this family of hoarders, huge warehouse full of stock, great relationships with the likes of Glen Grant, Macallan, Longmorn, Strathisla, you name it, being able to release some of their malt before they wanted to release a malt, because again, most of those output of those distilleries is going into the blends. Really are relationships that we kept up until the present day. And our operations director now, Stuart Urquhart, so he's George Urquhart's grandson. There's a few Urquharts kicking about the business, and Stuart's the ops director, so he really is the guardian of our stock. And I'm head of sales for Europe and have to pretty much, negotiate with Stuart to say, go on, let me sell this amazing whiskey, 70-year-old whiskey for thousands and thousands of pounds a bottle, because they've got this generational approach to aging it, maturing it, building value, and keeping these absolute jewels of whiskey going. So yeah, it's a nice place to be from my perspective, with a real just that passion and focus on malt whiskey and the heritage of malt whiskey. I think it's pretty unrivaled.
I seem to remember Gordon MacPhail were in the headlines recently, whiskey headlines, because you issued a statement about not purchasing any more mature stocks. Is that correct?
Yeah, so not more mature stocks. We've never really bought mature stocks. So one of the weird things about G&M is we've always sent our own casks to the distilleries. So that gives us a superpower of knowing it's going to be, we're sending this one to Mortlach. We know that ages forever. So we're going to send a first fill sherry butt and try and age it for 60 years. Or we're sending a refill bourbon barrel to X distillery because we know that's going to be pretty sweet and juicy in 12 or 15. So apart from that, yeah, it's dead right. We took the decision this year. Pretty much decided a couple of years ago, actually, this is the way the world was going. But we announced it this year that this is the last year that we'll ever make new fillings. But we've still got thousands of casks, so we're still bottling for decades. And we did fill some of those big heavy hitters that we know can age for decades this year. And so I don't think we'll run out for 70 or 80 years, given our track record.
That's
long enough to have to worry about it anyway.
If you're not filling any more and you're not going to run out for 70 or 80 years, then that's one.
Yeah,
I want to see the sort of 80-year-old Gordon and MacPhail bottling that comes out in.
That might be worth it. But the real reason is twofold. Well, we've got two distilleries of our own now, so Benromach that we'll talk about. We've built the cairn, so we're not selling any whiskey from the cairn yet, but we're producing spirit. And being G&M, we're going to keep that spirit for quite a wee while before we release it. So it'll be 10 or 12 years before we release a malt whiskey from the cairn. But that's got a big demand on wood, on casks, on cash, on focus, on time. We're a small business. So really the decision is we want to focus on what we think we do best, have as much control as possible. So we've got two distilleries making amazing new make now. If we've got an amazing cask, we'd rather put our own make in it. And the job of the independent bottler G&M is pretty much done. To have generated the funds to let the Urquhart family become a multi-distillery, brand-owning company. Try to move up the intellectual food chain, if you like. That's where the future lies. Yeah,
it makes perfect sense. Well, what I will say is I think your shop in Elgin is still one of the best whiskey shops in the world. So if anyone is up in that direction, visiting distilleries of Speysider, you've got to make the trip to the Gordon MacPhail shop in Elgin, where it all started, because it's cool.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. And the other thing they do there, they open bottles, right? So the paid tastings are amazing, and it's pretty much like the retail price split between the number of people who are there. So it's very fairly priced for an opportunity to taste stuff that individually as bottles is can be a fortune. So and the staff are super knowledgeable and passionate about what they do.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's get on to Benromach then. I guess maybe we'll do a little history of that distillery and then how Gordon MacPhail came into it.
So the distillery was founded in 1898, a time like now when the whiskey market was booming and lots of distilleries were getting built. The difference being there, of course, they were all being built to create whiskey that would then go into blends. So you're selling it to blenders. to go and be packaged up and sold around the world. It's in Speyside. It's in Forres, which is the very northwest corner of Speyside. So if you imagine where the River Spey reaches the sea, we're kind of along to the left of that, more towards Inverness. It is a very charismatic old distillery, as many of them are, but its make was, as I say, used for blending. It went through various hands. Its last owners were what is now Diageo, and they closed it in 1988. Again, not uncommon in those days. If you were not the most efficient, cheapest to run, or nearest the managing director's house, you tend to be on a sugary peg in the mid '80s.
Small as well, isn't it? So
it's very, very small. Yeah, so it's inefficient. So as a blending option, it's probably not the best. So it was closed in '83. Sorry, no. 88.
Which is not the first time it was closed, right? It closed quite.
It opened and closed a few times, with just in line with the demands of the industry. It's quite an interesting model of how supply chains react to global demand, actually, at a time that was much less globalized than we are now. But really, in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, it was acutely felt if there was a downturn or any of the varieties, prohibition or trade war, or all the things that have hit the category in the past.
Or a boom period where you get.
Or a boom, You get switched exactly
right now, perhaps.
quite like that. Difference now is distillers are opening with the intent from the start of being in control of their own destiny, making malt whiskey, selling it under their name, whatever they have to do to get to that point where they got mature whiskey. So, hopefully that's a more resilient model. But Benromach wasn't too resilient for its first century. It shut in '88. Meanwhile, Gordon
did it not shut 2 years after opening? I mean, again, this wasn't uncommon, but I have a feeling.
That's right. Well, it's a really short time after opening, and then opened, closed, changed hands, went burst, opened again, shut in '88. Meanwhile, Gordon MacPhail had been growing from being a grocer to being a wholesaler to being an independent bottler, to being well connected and relatively influential in whiskey, exporting a bit of whiskey, and had the means to fulfill George Urquhart's lifelong dream, which was to own a distillery, not just to be buying and filling and maturing and bottling, but to own it. So they got the chance to buy Benromach. But when I say they bought Benromach, they bought the buildings and the brand name, and we had some stock, G&M stock, that we'd filled there previously, and that was it. So it was empty, quite decrepit. So it took 5 years to renovate the buildings and really to put all the process equipment back in, to design what sort of distillery they wanted it to be. And that's fundamental to how Benromach tastes today. So being G&M, having casks of Speyside whiskies from the 40s, 50s, and 60s in the warehouse, the family at that time knew what those whiskies tasted like. We've still got some of them, so I've tasted some of them because I'm a lucky boy. And a lot of those very old Speysides have got a little bit of smoke in them, and they're not as clean as the spirits of today, right? There's a lot of probably better quality control, definitely better cost control, certainly more efficiency that's come into the Scotch whisky industry as the industry's grown, and you'd expect that. And particularly when it's run by multinationals who are very good at what they do, but what they aren't looking for is lots and lots of character. So to be able to then have this distillery that's by its nature always going to be small, to have an understanding of what the new make of almost 100 distilleries is like, because we've filled those in the past, understanding how those interact with wood, then be able to think, well, so what kind of firing do I want my stills? What kind of stills do I want? What kind of washbacks do I want to use? How are we going to mash this whiskey? How are we going to condense it? In the knowledge of, well, that's compared to Strathisla, compared to Macallan, Milton Duff, whatever you want to say, then that gave a great opportunity to go from almost a white sheet of paper, apart from it has to fit in this old building. So it's very compact and bijou. So having a little bit of smoke in our recipe for most, not the one we're going to taste tonight, but almost every Benromach has got 10 to 12 ppm of peat smoke in it. Using a long fermentation, we use two types of yeast, brewer's yeast and distiller's yeast. Used to happen in the olden days, doesn't often happen in distilleries nowadays. Everything in the distillery is done by hand. It's really old-fashioned, and it's really genuinely, there's 4 guys, and you can go around the distillery, which I highly recommend as a tour, because you just get the crack off the boys. So the tour guide will show you around, and there'll be Murdo, and you'll be dipping a thing into somewhere, and you'll say, what's the thing you're dipping in there? And you go, oh, well, actually, what I'm doing is I'm taking a sample from the underback here, and we're just going to put the hydrometer in it, which everywhere else is on the computer, and it tells you what your gravity is at. Or you'll say, see the bubbles up there in the window on the still. That means that the heads are coming through now. So if you watch the spirit safe, in about 30 seconds, they'll start flapping and spirit will start coming through. And you're going, aye, right, of course it will. And sure enough, I mean, they just know it. They know from expertise, from experience, and from their skills, which again is a really old-fashioned way to do things. We even fill the casks by hand. So Wednesday morning, Friday morning, they roll the casks out. They get a big thing it's almost like filling your car with petrol from the receiver tank. And they fill the way they empty cask, fill it with spirit, tap in the bung, roll it back over to the scales, weigh it again. What's the point of that? I was at a show in Lyon on the weekend and had quite an interesting discussion with the guy saying, well, okay, you say it's handmade, what's the point? What does that mean for the quality of my glass? And for example, why do you bother rolling the casks around? Is that just so you can make nice videos? Well, it's partly a philosophy. It's partly a belief that if we've put handmade, real, genuine effort and emotion and thought into making this thing, that's special, right? And that's special whether you're buying beautiful prosciutto, whiskey, a pair of hand-riveted jeans, or something that people like about, that real craftsmanship and artisanship. There's a reason that that's very popular. But also, I don't know, maybe rolling the casks the 100 yards from the filling store across the warehouse, maybe that gets more interaction between the spirit and the wood as soon as it's filled in. If you come along with a forklift, you put it on a pallet, you lift it up, it's maybe just sitting there. Don't know. There's all these tiny details, the long fermentation, the way we run the stills, all of that is about getting as much of this character as we possibly can into our whiskey. And it gives us a whiskey which is very characterful, really full flavored. That's whatever Benromach you have, be really mouth-filling. Lots of rondeur, as they called it in Lyon at the weekend. Rondeur. So really mouth-filling, but never tough, never macho, always pretty approachable. It can be very complex, very dense whiskey, but always with a real sweetness about it. And yeah, that's the house style. We only ever use first fill casks. That's the other weird one, and that's not old fashioned. That's just our Gordon MacPhail obsession with wood, and we're lucky that we've always had the independent bottling side of our business to use Benromach casks as a refill, I guess. But yeah, we only ever use first fill sherry, first fill bourbon, and for the whiskey we're going to have tonight, it's first fill virgin oak.
So does that mean that a lot of the Gordon MacPhail bottlings of the last sort of 20 years are actually refill Benromach casks?
Yeah. And probably a lot of the ones for the next 20 years will be as well, given the amount of time we like to age gin bottles. No, they are. So I've seen actually. So I get a list once a year of here's the cask we'll be releasing. It's the way we do it. And I've seen for the first time a refill organic, which is it's not a Benromach bottling, but there'll be a connoisseur's choice bottling this year in Europe, which is refill organic. So that's clearly come from one of these bottled 15 years ago.
It's interesting. If you're another whiskey producer making organic whiskey, you could use ex-Benromach.
You could indeed, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about organic, because it was the first legally certified organic whiskey out of Scotland, wasn't it? 2006.
That's exactly right. Yeah. First to do it, first to get certified. So we're certified by the Soil Association, and they're very, very thorough. And it's like that's upstream and downstream certification. So the farm that we get the barley from are Soil Association certified. We get audited. Your processes have to be very specific. So actually the way we do it is organic's the first thing that goes through the distillery after our annual lockdown for cleaning. So if you've had non-organic whiskey going through the whole process, you have to chase it with a batch of organic that you're not allowed to call organic, and then a batch of organic that you are allowed to call organic. So doing it straight after the annual clean down and maintenance is how we do it. And then finding the source of the virgin oak casks and be able to do that part was very important as well, because obviously if we want to be organic certified, you'd have had to have an organic sherry or organic bourbon that was able to supply cask, and that's just wasn't in those days a stable supply chain. Maybe a little bit easier now, but anyway, it creates a style which is very
How
appealing.
are you doing that exactly then? Because they are refill bourbons and refill sherries you're using, or
Nope, they are virgin oak.
Oh,
Yeah,
virgin.
virgin oak.
Right, okay,
Yeah,
right. Gotcha.
virgin Missouri oak, which is traced right through the cooperage through to us.
Got you. Okay. Wow. So it's all virgin casks.
Yeah, which explains a little bit of how it tastes and smells and all that. But
And
I've got a wee video for
do you want to try that? Yeah,
and
do you
it
want to try
introduces
that?
the farmer as well. So I will try and do it. We'll test the technology. Share screen, I think lets me do it.
And I might need to change the layout a little bit, but if you start playing it, let's see what happens.
Let's try.
Oh, here we go.
Let's see.
Oh, look at this. Very clever.
Will it work? It's promising. Maybe it won't. What I'll do is I'll just talk to you about it, and I will drop you the link so that folk watching can hop on YouTube and have a look afterwards.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
It's quite nice. It's 3.5 minutes with Keith R. Right. Have I stopped sharing? I think I've stopped sharing.
Yeah, you have. You can't see it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Cool. Yes, I see you again now. Yeah. So it's shows it's Keith and the farmer whose barley we use, who happens to be Keith's brother-in-law, and this farm is quite close to the distillery. So it shows the sort of single farm approach that we now have for this year's vintage, which is really cool.
And did you say there's no peated in this?
No peat. No, we debated that a bit. And this was before Monty Don peat is bad. So generally speaking, peat's an extractive industry. And one of the reasons people might want to buy organic is because principally it's better for the environment in the farm where that barley is grown. That's the biggest single difference. If you're buying organic meat or organic coffee or organic olive oil, there might be health benefits you can claim and so on. Would never do that for whiskey because ultimately it's whiskey. It's not going to be more healthy because it's organic. So it's mainly an environmental benefit. At the
obviously, peat is not that. Extracting peat out of the ground is not that. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. I'm surprised though because, and I guess maybe it's just the way you're making whiskey, but for me, compared to other Speysiders, it still has a certain kind of, maybe not smokiness, but a robustness, a kind of almost industrialness to it. Yeah. That is sort of representative of Benromach, this whole sort of like, historical Speyside style. But
it's that mouth-filling thing, isn't it? So if I had to guess where that comes from, I think our wash is pretty robust because we do this long fermentation. We still use wooden wash backs. So I think there's a lot of flavour in our wash, and some of that's going to come over the line arm. We're using the same yeasts for organic as we do for our the rest of our whiskies, and then they're virgin oak casks, but they're first fill, and so you get lots and lots of wood character. And one of the notes that I get from organic is it doesn't taste like a bourbon matured whiskey. It tastes a little bit like a bourbon. The mouth feels certainly a little bit bourbony. It's very, very silky in the mouth, and I think that's the interaction with that new virgin oak cask that gives you that. But I know what you mean. It's definitely robust, but it's very sweet. It's very easy. Tasting notes people give it are like praline, a little bit of spiciness. Yeah, I think aniseed's a good call from Brian there on the message. I certainly get that. A little bit of white pepper. Cheers! I'm gonna have a taste of mine.
Yeah, I've worked my way through about 10% of a bottle here. It's a great. It's just a
what
great
a way to live.
daily dram, right? Like it's such a nice.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Yeah. I love it, and I do think Benromach's such a kind of hidden gem. Really, I think possibly it's a victim of its size. It's sort of seen as this like chocolate box, quintessential, tiny little distillery, and it's kind of cute. But you're just turning out such great whiskies, I think. And and you know, again, like talking about the sort of like robustness. It reminds me a little bit of Springbank in a way. It's got like
that's definitely a comparison we get. They've both got that slightly like, I don't know. There's a hint of the metal workshop about it, a bit of grease and dust and something that just has a little bit more edge about it. Not that, I mean,
totally.
My QA team would shoot me for saying that, but there is something that's like a robust character.
Yeah, well, maybe that sort of language doesn't play too well with some consumers, but I think people who are really into whiskey love descriptions that are probably a little bit outside of the box.
Yeah.
Going to segue into the bourbon because you mentioned bourboniness, and we've got Michelle from Ezra Brooks waiting patiently on the line. So thanks, Gordon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was really informative and fantastic.
Good to chat.
Stick around and
cheers, y'all. Stick around and
cool. Michelle,
how's it going? Hey, Tristan. Hey, Gordon.
Good. How are you?
Hey, Michelle.
Yes, it's actually Michele. It's the Italian way.
Michele, sorry.
Michele. Yeah, no worry at all. No worry at all. So I need to let you know that I am fortunately traveling for work, so I'm on my hotel room, and this is the first time I do a tasting without actually having some whiskey to share with you guys.
No worries. That's okay.
Trust me, I'm more sorry than you guys.
Well, we'll just drink extra for you if you like.
Please do.
I'll drink your share. How's that?
I had quite a heavy drinking because I'm here for a trade show, so it's a bartender show. Not today, but I had quite my few share of tasting during the last 2-3 days. So can't say then I'm completely dry this week.
Yeah, I know I think both myself and Gordon know the experience of doing trade shows. It's kind of like an endurance test. It's
a great way to test drive your marketing chat, though. You certainly find out what resonates with people and what doesn't when you've actually say it to their eyes rather than just write it on the bottle.
Yeah, also, I'm a curious mind, so I love to try things. And I think you cannot be a curious mind if you do this job. It's not just about what you represent or what you do, right? So much up there.
Lovely, cool. Well, look, let's get on and talk a bit about Ezra Brooks. So, do you want to start by maybe talking about Luxco and Lux Row and NGP and kind of give us the backstory on the distilling operation, or do you want to talk about the brand history first? It's your call.
Well, I think it's a fair point to give a bit introduction to those three. I think we can actually put it in order, so everyone knows. Every American whiskey drinker knows, or at least they heard about NGP. It used to be a sort of taboo word, is this whiskey come from NGP and so on. Now, NGP is a huge production in Indiana. It actually stands for Midwest Grain Product. They have 3 divisions. One that is a bulk division, so they do actually a lot of whiskey. They do about 27 different mash bill. They are at the moment the biggest production of rye whiskey in US. They have the biggest inventory of American single malt as now. It's a distillery that has been there for about 200 years. It used to be before Seagram, it passed different hands. But that's the bulk division. And there's a lot of brands then been lean of NGP because, as you guys know, when you want to start a distillery, you don't just open a distillery. You start with a brand, then you maybe source, then you have enough money to put aside, you invest on barrels, you start to run your still. You need to wait, and time is it's not on your favor. So some people start to do gin or something that you can sell immediately, some other just sourced from NGP. In a way, we were actually one of those people because our rye is not a secret. It's always been sourced from NGP. Quite rightly so. I believe, rye from Indiana is just, it makes sense. It's different. It is what they specialize on. I believe the best rye as a crop it grows in Northern Europe. We got amazing rye in Germany, in Norway, but in US, for what I know, Indiana, it is where rye was the local crop, so where it actually grow the best. They have different variety of rye that are organic. They have more heritage and so on. I'm not saying all the rye that they use in NGP is organic, no, but they use organic rye as well, and they have so many recipes, so many variation. They specialize on that. And rye especially is it's really complicated to use because it's sticky, create foam during fermentation. You need to have proper equipment. So that's what they're famous for. And they have, of course, even the brand division, which has been a victim of that success with the Bolt division. And they even have NGP ingredient, which is a lot of things like protein and alternative to meat. I don't want to mention brand actually, but there are big brand up there. They're actually they are on the open market, and they are in the stock market. They actually use products that are being patented by NGP product division. So it's quite a huge operation. Loxco, in the other end, is something that started from the family Lox. It was a bottling line at the beginning. Then they started to do vodka. They started to do, product that didn't require a lot of time on aging and so on. They started to source whiskey as well, of course. NGP was, big partner back there. And then they source. They started to actually invest on distillery. They started first with a distillery in Mexico. So they actually started. The first distillery they had was with tequila production, with the family Gonzalez, and they now have two. Then they actually started this partnership with Steve Beam with the Limestone Branch Distillery, which was a really small operation back then. We were talking about at the beginning about 1 barrel a day. Now they extended the Limestone Branch is about 8, maximum 10 barrel a day. And then they actually invested on the Lox Row. So Lox Row was actually from when it was everything run by the family Lox. And that's the big distillery, big relatively, because now we NGP, we actually merge, so that's not our bigger anymore, of course. But we talking enough to have an operation to provide 2 different mash bill, a traditional mash bill we're gonna try today, and a wheaten mash bill, and overall they have about 6 different brands there. So we still have our rye from Indiana, but all our bourbon is focused, apart from one which is actually heavy rye mash bill, is from Indiana. All our bourbon is from 2 distilleries in Kentucky. So they merged during COVID. It was exciting, amazing, because I finally got to know the people behind NGP. And for me, I was a big fan of NGP anyway, because a lot of the whiskey that I adore, were actually coming from NGP. And it's just incredible. So now we are together. The merge makes sense because NGP saw what Loxco did with a lot of brands. Then they used to be sourced, and they create so much behind that. They were so good with the marketing, changing the label, upgrading the brand, premiumization, and eventually even have so much to invest on their own distillery, their own production. And NGP was like, well, we got the liquid, and you guys have, what we need to promote our brands. So it's a sort of, now there is production and brand division that is merged together, and that's what we are.
Nice. So that's a pretty good bird's eye view of MGP, and interesting to hear. I actually visited that distillery about 6 years ago, I think.
Okay.
Which is unusual. They don't really let people in very often.
I was about to say, we just opening now the distillery tour center. We never let anyone in apart from you. So
yeah, I was writing a book on American whiskey, so I twisted their arms and they let me in for a day with my photographer as well, which is very kind. But yeah, it's a massive operation. Hey, it's huge distillery, and as you say, it's impressive what's going on there in terms of the different mash bills and all the different recipes. As much as it is all the client relationships and all the different, because there, like you say, there was a period about 5 or 10 years ago where every single rye on the market pretty much was made in one distillery.
Without exaggerating, there was a point where literally it was like over 90% was NGP.
Yeah. So let's go back to Lux Row and talk a bit about Ezra Brooks and the recipe and everything with that.
So I actually even have some image to share. It's not a presentation or anything, but at least we have an idea of the distillery, what it looks like, and if you like me to share, or we can just
go. Yeah, let's try it.
Share. I'm gonna just find the share button and.
You tried Ezra Brooks before, Gordon? Ever had it?
I have not, to my shame, no. I'll be looking it out.
Yeah, well, we're in the 99, which is 99 proof, so 49.5. And I think at that strength, it's pretty good. There we go.
Yes. So this is what it looked like from outside. It's, I would say, fairly modern structure as a distillery, even though, it's quite traditional what they do.
Got nods to kind of classic kind of Kentucky architecture, like the water tower kind of thing and everything. Yeah,
exactly. Now the structure like that is because Michelle Locks, actually the wife of Don Locks, she was heavily involved in that. I believe she's actually is an architect, or if she's not, can be an architect, because she designed the distillery as you see it, in and inside and outside, which I think is it's a beautiful structure. It's really well done for that. Where we are is in Bardstown. Bardstown is, I believe, is the heart of Kentucky. They call it Bourbon Caput Mundi, and they have this big square. It's right here, and there are some like red brick on this square, and each of those brick actually have the name of all the distillery involved, in Kentucky, which is quite incredible.
It looks like something a teenager designed in Minecraft, doesn't it?
Yeah. I was actually there when I started with the company. It was about 8 years now ago. And when I started, Locks Row wasn't there. They didn't have Locks Row as a distillery. But I was there when they put the brick down, which I think is quite a milestone. I'm really glad.
But that's like Hollywood Star getting their name on Hollywood Boulevard, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. And I remember I went back then when the steel wasn't even up, so it was a building ground. And then 1 year after, they didn't have just one steel running. They had a full warehouse of 20,000 barrel already fill in. As now we have 10,000 barrel. So inside the distillery, the ground itself is quite old. You see this the stone house, 1806. It was obviously not as you see it now. It was a bit run down. Needed some redoing. But it's historical land. Now this is actually where Joe Rampy, the master distillery, does private tasting, barrel pick, VIP tour, and Joe Rampy is living in the distillery, so it's quite a big land. It's there 24 hours. It's a beautiful land. And the previous owner, I remember there was just one close. Then we couldn't really. That was either it was a deal breaker. It was like, you take the land, you can do whatever you want with that, but you keep my peacocks. So it's actually, I think every distillery should have an animal. It's quite nice, And the Limestone branch, we had 3 dogs and 1 cat.
Any animals, Gordon?
Yeah, we've got a cat. We got a cat.
There we go. Yes, the supervisor. The cat is the supervisor.
Good for, traditionally, it's good for killing mice, right? Mice get in the grain and then you're screwed. So, it's quite a tradition.
I saw a video online. Someone that put a sort of GPS in a distillery cat. And it's crazy because it was amazing. And this video show actually how the cat was like patrolling at nighttime. And it was actually going to the, next to the grain and, in the part of the warehouse when it was, some grain left there. So he knew where to go. And
he's not getting the cask warehouse. He's not responsible for the Angels share, is he?
no, but he was going for the grain. So I think the cat know exactly where to find the house, and it's crazy.
Gordon, you correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Glen Turret has the record-breaking cat?
Yeah, I think you're right. They do. Yeah.
Towser the cat. There's a statue outside the front, and that cat has the world record for killing the most mice in a lifetime. And they estimate it's something crazy like 100,000 mice it's killed. It's like unbelievable. It's genocide on mice, basically.
Wow. But that's impressive. No, we don't have that. Peacock, they don't kill mice. Hopefully, we don't have any. But they doing a lot of white souvenirs on the parking lot.
Yeah, and they're noisy.
Yeah, they are, and they're really dramatic. But they're beautiful. They really are. So in terms of what we actually do there, we have 2 main mash bill. We do all our whiskey out of 2 mash bill. The one we're gonna talk about today is quite traditional. But yeah, so they are medium size, like 4,000 gallon. But we are about to actually put 2 more. So we are extending as we're talking now. We're extending the distillery. We're putting up a second still. So whatever I say in this presentation, I think it's fair to say then it will be soon enough double in number. Now, in terms of the tank, 12, that's what we used to have. We open a whole new section, fermentation tank. When we do whiskey, we do in 1 mash at the time. We only do either wheated or we do traditional. And then in terms of barrel, we have mainly our barrel is independent staves, but then we have even Speysider cooperage. Is everything quite traditional? Even the ABV going to the cask 62.5. In terms of distillation, it is a single column. It's about 27 rectification tray. It's steep plate. It's not bubble cap. And then we have our laboratory, which I think is exactly where John Rampe make the difference. So he's a food engineer. So in terms of checking the quality of the grain, checking for fungus, for density, for humidity in the grain content, and the mash is it's like almost like in an obsessive way. The mash is checked all the way down to the 3-4 day fermentation from anything that could go wrong. And we're not talking just about checking the pH or for lactobacillic. They have material there that can literally weigh the molecule of each sample just for consistency, and it's not even just to maintain that product, even to understand in terms of all the conjugate, the esters and everything that you can do in terms of acid as well, if there is any sort of a different from the previous one. As we know, yeast and it's quite so delicate to mutate, and the grain itself, it's true that we use single dent yellow corn, but it's not always a mathematical form that you got exactly the same amount of starch and especially from the malted barley that we get and everything else. In terms of the still, Vendom, you never get a wrong Vendom. I think, I don't know, probably must have been like 1 or 2 distillery out of everything that I saw in Kentucky that didn't have a Vendom, but Vendom is everywhere. And I have the pleasure and the honor to actually meet Mike Vendom, to go there. They were building back then a 3-chamber still, but then Vendom, they are the master of copper and brass. Our single still, as I said, is quite traditional in that sense. Doubler, single column. But I think what is a bit different from other is that it's inside and outside revested in copper. I say overkill, but it's tailor-made. We like it. In terms of mash brand, then we do. You see 4 here. There is actually more now. We recently acquired even Penelope. So there is a lot of things going on. Obviously, Blood Oath, but in terms of Ezra Brooks and Rebel, that's the two then Lockthrow actually started with. Let's say they were always being the focus, and then we just gonna check a bit about Ezra. Now Ezra Brooks and Seljor Taylor, at least that's what the legend said. They used to be the guy in the 1897 that created the very first law that was protecting consumer. We're talking about time when I think imitation whiskey had so much crap in there, turpentine and other things really dangerous for you. Then it was necessary to put a stop on it. And the Bottle and Bond Act is quite a long, complicated law. I would say it needs to be distilled by the same master distiller by a single distillery season. Age in a bonded warehouse. Always put in the bottle at 50% ABV and so on. Now we do have Bottle and Bond whiskey. Ezra is not one of that as now, but Ezra Brooks was the guy behind this. So, it's a tribute on that sense. In terms of, what type of whiskey Ezra is, Ezra now is 99. It's 99 to stay 99. We're not going to go down ABV, maybe up. We actually even have a barrel strength and so on. But in terms of profile of whiskey, it's really, really traditional. So I said, this is our traditional mash bill. There is no secret to mash bill. This is what it is, 10% rye, 12% malted barley. The rest is single dent yellow corn.
Is that the same mash that you use for Rebel and everything else, or is it different?
Well, for Rebel and David Nicholson, so we had two mash bill. Rebel is 4% malted barley, 20% wheat, and the rest is
Rebel's wheat, is it? Right. Okay.
Yeah. So Rebel, we use it for David Nicholson 1842, and we use it for Davis County, which is a 4-grain whiskey. So, but Rebel, let's say, is our wheated bourbon by excellence. Then there is a version of Davis County they have it, but Rebel is the wheated.
So the distinction between the whiskies you're making is mash, or is it sometimes the cask selection, or is it sometimes, I don't know, something else? Yeast
It's all of that apart from the yeast. Actually, I'm gonna stop sharing here. It's all of that, all of the above, but the yeast. So the yeast is always the same. It's apothecary yeast. It's the one that we use for both mash. In terms of the mash, we actually, as a company, we use all the 3 mash, actually 4 mash. So we even have a heavy rye bourbon. We actually have the heaviest rye bourbon in the market, 39% rye. But that, of course, that one is focused on rye, so we do it in Indiana. In Kentucky, we have traditional mash bill, which is Ezra, and we use that one as well for, let's say, all our portfolio that is traditional mash bill is the same. But what is different about Ezra is Ezra have the signature of charcoal filter, so it's actually always.
Oh yes, yeah.
Ezra
rye.
So
let's talk about that, because that is unusual, isn't it? Well, it's not unusual. Yeah. You're the only people doing it.
Yeah. Well, what is not unusual, I will say, is chill filter. This is chill filter, but we don't mention when it's chill filter. I think you mentioned when it's non-chill filter. But in terms of charcoal filter, it's not what people have as an idea in terms of like rum, because the first time I learned about charcoal filter was with white rum. Rum that is aged, but it's not, dark in color. No, charcoal filter, it make it a bit more smooth. It's retain some of the young flavor of the grain. So what
you're doing it. It's not like Jack Daniels or the Lincoln County presses. You're doing it after maturation, yes, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
So whereas Jack Daniels is after distillation, before maturation. Yeah.
Yes. So and also it's the type of wood that Jack Daniels they use. They use charcoal from maple tree, and it's a slow dripping. Now, my knowledge, obviously, I'm not representing Jack Daniel, but is what that filtration does. Well, filtration is a process. Is actually again retaining a bit of the young grain flavor from the liquid, so you feel all the fruity ester, and then it goes to the barrel after. We don't. We just chill filter it before we bottle it. So it's a product that is already done and finished as a bourbon, and then we charcoal filter it. And it's like that for all the expression of Rebel, even the Ezra Brooks, even Ezra Brooks Rye, even Ezra Brooks 7, the barrel strength, all of that.
Okay.
And then in terms of type of cask, yes, we do that as well. So we have different finish, but mainly, and that's by law, we always use a brand new oak that is charred inside. As you know, we could use any oak. It's like, I don't know, I think over 200 type of oak that you could use, but we do use American white oak. Scratch Alba, Independent States are really consistent. So where they take it, which forest, and how they cut it, and how they dry season it. My knowledge, our barrels from Independent States are always seasoned outside. We don't use the kiln. It's always air dry season the wood. And it's like, it just out of consistency. Obviously, you got a lot of lactones, which we like, that coconut from the barrel, a lot of vanillin, of course, a lot of caramel notes. But Joe Rumpel was actually telling me what is really important about American oak is the tylosis as well, which sort of cover the porosity of the wood, so it prevents leaking. And as we know, in Kentucky, the Angel share is already really, really strong. If you have leaking as well on the warehouse, it's not a lot of fun. So, yeah.
Cool, man. Well, look, there is a serious whirlwind tour of Ezra Brooks, of Lux Row, and of American whiskey or bourbon as well. So appreciate that. There's a few tasting notes I'm just going to pop up quickly before we finish up. Sweet, rich, and spicy. Already got a bottle. Great. And prefer it to the rye. And then we got a bit of cinnamon and the rye comes through. That's a great whiskey. I think a lot of it, not all of it, comes down to that bottling strength. I think bourbons need to be above 45% to really shine. I think it helps to kind of cut through some of the corn a bit and add a bit of spice and depth and length on the palate, and especially with, well, not even especially with rye, because I think with wheated bourbons it's perhaps even more important because they're softer. But with rye as well, it helps that rye come through a little bit and you get that pepperiness on it, which I really like.
Yeah. I find sometimes, not all the time, it's not perfect rule, but with wheated bourbon, sometimes when you go in higher in ABV, you got a bit more of the alcohol burn. When we have especially traditional, or even with heavier rye, the higher you go in ABV, the more richer is the whiskey, but you don't get the alcohol hint to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just me, but with the birds, yeah. This one here especially, I think, is what I would expect as traditional flavor profile. Obviously, there are some notes that are more emphasized respect others, but you get that sweet, rich caramel. It's almost like salted caramel. There is that peppery notes. There is that vanilla, of course. And everything that it's like, oh my God, we hear it so many times in bourbon. Yeah, it's true. This is not an unusual bourbon. This is meant to be, an everyday drum. Then it's meant to be a really well balanced, easy to drink. But even though if it's spicy, but smooth enough to be, a nice drum for everyday drum. Yeah.
Right, look, guys.
That balance of bit of character, bit of edge, and then smoothness, approachable. You don't want it to be a chore. So maybe that's the line you can take through both the whiskies you had tonight.
I think so. Both great sipping whiskies for sure, and both different tasting whiskies as well. So, which is what's so cool about the category. Yeah. Guys, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate the depth that both of you have gone into your whiskey distilleries and everything. It's really appreciated, and we've had some nice comments as well. So, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you,
guys.
Thank
you very much. Nice to see you, and cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.